Assalamu alaikum, this is Shama Tuzara, and today my topic of discussion will be constrictive pericarditis. So, I have made a previous video on the septal bound sign. It is one of the diagnostic features of constrictive pericarditis. So, if you have not seen that video, please go ahead, watch that video, it will help you in this topic. So, starting with constrictive pericarditis, first of all, the first thing which comes in your mind is that what is constrictive pericarditis. Of course, with every disease we start with that first point, what is constrictive pericarditis, we should know first. So constrictive pericarditis, pericardium means it is involving pericardium, itis means inflammation, pericardium means involving pericardium, itis means any inflammation is going on. So there is inflammation of the pericardium. And why it is called constrictive? Because the whole mechanism that occurs during this disease lead to decrease in size of the pericardial cavity, that is, it causes constriction of the pericardial cavity. Fine. So now we're going to talk about basically the definition and the overview of what is constrictive pericarditis. So it is a disorder in which there is fibrous scarring of the pericardium. Fine. And whenever scarring occurs, it leads to thickening of the pericardium, and ultimately now this pericardium, it surrounds the heart, and between the heart and the pericardium is the pericardial cavity. So thickening of this pericardium will lead to obliteration or narrowing of the pericardial cavity. So this is basically the whole theme of the term constrictive pericarditis. I repeat, there is some scarring mechanism within the pericardium that lead to thickening of the pericardium. Now when it's thickened, then it leads to obliteration of the pericardial cavity. Fine. I think up to here it's clear. Now we are going to talk that okay, thick pericardial cavity is now narrow. How it will affect the heart, and which phase of the heart will be effective. So that we are going to discuss now. First of all, I'll write the whole pathophysiology. Now we are basically discussing the pathophysiology of the constrictive pericarditis. Now, talking about its pathophysiology, how we'll start is that suppose if this is the ventricle, this is both the ventricles, and this is the pericardial lining, stool lining, visual pericardium and the parietal pericardium, and between it this is the pericardial cavity, and here is the interventricular septum. These are the two ventricles, right ventricle, left ventricle. This is the pericardial PC. I'll write for pericardial cavity. Fine. Now what is happening that when, because of thickening mechanism, this pericardium has become thickened, these lines are showing thickening. So compared to before, the pericardial cavity has now become narrow. Up to here I think we are clear that the pericardial cavity is now narrow. Now what will happen is that when during the diastole phase, blood will come from the respective atrias into the respective ventricles, then what will happen, these ventricles, suppose these are the ventricles, these ventricles has to now expand. Why expand? Why dilate? To accommodate the increased amount of blood that is coming within them. Fine. Now during the early phase of the diastole, as we know, the diastole has three phases. So the first phase is the early rapid filling, then is slow passive filling. First is also passive, and the third is because of atrial contraction. So this is your old basic physiology concept that there are three phases of diastole. Now we are more going to concern on this early phase of the diastole. Early phase will occur normally until, I repeat, it's very important, listen it carefully, the ventricles wall, they will expand, suppose these are the two ventricle walls, they will expand up to the point the resistance shown by the pericardium, the wall formed by the pericardium, they will expand up to there. So important point, early phase of the diastole occurs normally until it reaches the point where the thickening of the pericardial wall has set a limit, after which there is, at that point, there is rapid, I repeat, there is rapid, or you can say more good, abrupt cessation of the ventricular filling. At this point, now ventricle can't expand even a small distance more, even a small point more. So at that point there is abrupt cessation, abrupt stoppage of the filling. When it stops, what happens, that the ventricle wall, it strikes the pericardial wall, ventricle wall strikes the pericardial wall like a clap, as we clap together. When they clap, pericardial knock is heard at that point. And what point I am trying to explain here is that after that point no filling will occur. This is basically the constrictive pericarditis, that I'll write here. Early diastole will occur normally, but once the limit reached, there would be abrupt cessation or stoppage of the ventricle filling. Up to here I hope it's clear. Now very important point, if you know how to relate things, if you have studied cardiac tamponade, important point, cardiac tamponade, what happens in cardiac tamponade, this cavity is not thickened, it is filled with fluid. So imagine if you have a balloon and you have put it in a tank of water, the balloon, you're constantly putting air in the balloon, and since water is around it, it will have resistance to expand or to accommodate the incoming air, and that resistance starts from the point you have start filling in it. So the point which I am trying to explain to you is that during cardiac tamponade, from the start of the diastole or throughout the diastole, I'll say more precisely, throughout the diastole there is problem within the ventricle filling or ventricular filling is interrupted. Now the point which you should take away home, or the takeaway message here, is that if you're talking about constrictive pericarditis, yes, the ventricular filling is abrupted, is disturbed, but it is disturbed not earlier, after some phase of early diastole occur normal, and when the limit reached, then abruption of the cessation of the ventricular filling occurs. But in cardiac tamponade, from the very start of the diastole, the resistance is offered by the fluid present within the pericardial cavity, and in cardiac tamponade, during the whole diastole, ventricular filling is interrupted or ventricular diastole is impeded. So this is the takeaway home message, first message that I have given you today, which should be in your mind. Solving your clinical issues when you are doing your clinical practice, it's very important. I hope it's clear up to now. Now when we have come to this point that this level is reached, fine, when this level is now reached, after it more incoming blood within the ventricles, but the ventricle can't expand. When this state occurs, what happens is that to accommodate the blood coming within the ventricle, this septum then moves. And it's very genuine that when outside expansion option is lost, then he has to do something within it to solve its problem and to equalize the pressure. So whenever this condition occurs, the septum will move, which is called a septal bound sign. I've already discussed in detail before, I won't waste time over it, you just listen that video. Septum will move from high pressure area to the low pressure area, and this septal movements will occur until this movement will occur until pressure are equalized. So the second takeaway message here will be that there will be increase in the pressures within the chamber, and ultimately the diastolic filling pressures will be in equilibrium or will be equalized. Now, if you read this line or hear it from someone that during constrictive pericarditis or even in the cardiac tamponade, but you'll stick here to constrictive pericarditis, the pressures are elevated, but then the diastolic pressures of all the chambers of the heart will then become equalized. Then I think there will be no confusion in your mind that why this equalization is occurred and why it is particularly occurring within the constrictive pericarditis. I hope this second takeaway message is clear in your mind. Now we are going to discuss that what sort of, this is the whole pathophysiology, and now we have to relate this pathophysiology and the clinical features. Fine. Up to here we have discussed. Now, as we know that the right ventricle has to empty into the pulmonary arteries, left ventricle into the aorta. Listen carefully. When blood is coming in the right ventricle, but it can't accommodate the blood, fine, then what will happen, that this blood will undergo backflow. Backflow of this blood will occur, and when the backflow occurs, then what will happen, venous return will decrease. So this is our first problem. I'll write the problems here, that what we are facing here. Like, again I'll draw the diagram so it's become clear in your mind. Suppose these are the two ventricles. This is the septum, right ventricle, left ventricle. This right ventricle has to empty into the pulmonary arteries, left ventricle into the aorta. And as we know, you all will already know that right ventricle receives blood from, tell me, of course, right atrium. Left ventricle receives blood from, of course, the left atrium. And from where this right atrium receives blood from? Both the major veins, superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. Now this is the whole circuit, and this left atrium receives blood from pulmonary veins, and these pulmonary veins are coming from, of course, the lungs, and this pulmonary artery, it goes to the lungs. So this is the whole circuit. Fine. Now what I'm going to discuss here is that whenever there is increased amount of blood coming into the ventricles, now the venous return will decrease. Why? Because the right ventricle is now not able to accommodate that increased amount of blood, and the blood will start to backflow into the, I'll make it red arrows, blood will occur backflow from right ventricle to the right atrium. From right atrium, blood will backflow behind in the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. So when this backflow occurs, what is happening, that the venous return which was coming to our right side of the heart is now decreased. Why? Because maximum is now going back. So venous return is decreased. First point. Fine. Why venous return is decreased? I've explained you the whole backflow mechanism. This is very important. You have to keep in your mind, our all clinical features plus our diagnosis will be based on this first mechanism. Second, what happens is that when less blood is moving out from the right ventricle into the pulmonary arteries, this less blood will ultimately go to the lungs. Less blood is coming in the lungs. When less blood is coming in the lungs, pulmonary veins receive less blood, left atrium less, left ventricle less, and as a result, through the aorta, it has to pump blood to whole of our body. So our body is now receiving less blood. So all the way, net result will be cardiac output will be decreased. Why cardiac output is decreased? Because preload, the blood which is coming to the ventricles, that is reduced, resulting in reduce in the ejection fraction and ultimately less cardiac output. So the second two major problems here are, number one, decreased venous return, backflow of the blood. Number two, decreased cardiac output. Fine. These are the two very, very, very important pathologies. Now we'll just discuss in detail that when these two processes occur within the heart or in our body, then what will be the consequences, what effects they will produce, and those will be all our clinical features plus our signs, plus those will be diagnosed on the ECG. uh, plus all the diagnostic modalities. So first we'll talk about what this venous return will do. This venous return, when venous return is reduced, backflow of blood occurs. Where backflow is going? From right atrium to the veins, systemic as well as pulmonary veins. So first point, when superior vena cava will have increased amount of blood, it will cause the jugular veins to become dilated. So jugular venous pressure will be elevated. Fine. JVP is elevated. This is the first sign that appear. Now JVP is elevated. Along with it, another sign that appear is Kussmaul's sign. Now what is this Kussmaul sign? That JVP is paradoxically rise of JVP during inspiration. Why during inspiration? I've already explained this concept in the septal bounce video, but I'll just give a brief overview here. Kindly see that video first. Look, during inspiration, the lungs expand. The pressure which the lungs were applying on the right atrium is now not occurring. When that pressure is not occurring, these veins, they will drain into the right atrium. So briefly, during the inspiration, the venous return to the right atrium is increased, resulting in the right ventricle is increased. So this increased blood, now since it can't move forward, it will backflow into these veins. So during inspiration, since venous return is increased, so backflow of this blood occurs within these veins, and that lead to increase in the jugular venous pressure during the inspiration. This is called the Kussmaul's sign. Fine. Moving on, that what else feature will appear. Now since the whole of our systemic circulation plus our pulmonary circulation is now having increased amount of blood, I repeat, increased blood is within them, because venous return, it comes back, it leads to fluid overload in the body, and this fluid overload, it will cause within the systemic circulation from the vessels, fluid will leak out because the hydrostatic pressure within the vessels are increased. So it will lead to two features. Number one, dependent edema into the systemic circulation. Dependent edema will occur, and same within the lungs. What happened that even pulmonary edema occurs, but not much, so we won't write here. Now when the fluid is increased, then it will lead to leakage of the fluid into the cavities of our body. So talking about the cavities, first will be the pleural cavity, so pleural effusions will develop. Second is the peritoneal cavity, so ascites will develop. Fine. And pericardial cavity is already affected. So pleural effusions develop, ascites develop, plus sign will be hepatic congestion because of this fluid overload. So the signs of hepatic congestion, Palmer arrhythmia. How to remember the signs? I'll just give you a brief overview here. To remember the sign, hold your left hand. First point will be Palmer arrhythmia. Clap that hand on your shoulder. On the shoulder, spider angiomata. Then move this wave which you are passing down on the left side, splenomegaly. On the umbilicus, umbilical veins will be distended. Above to the right side, the hepatomegaly, liver will be enlarged, hepatomegaly. So these are all the signs. Starting a wave, like you have seen a dance move or a wave or this clapping movement. Palmer arrhythmia on the hand, shoulder, spider angiomata. Coming down to the left side, splenomegaly, umbilicus, umbilical veins are distended. Right side, the hepatomegaly. So these are all the signs of hepatic congestion that are seen, and they are attributed to this fluid overload condition. Fine. So hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, all signs will be present. I just write it here. Hepatosplenomegaly, these all signs will be present. Now these are all the effects which are because of this volume venous return that was going back. And other sign that will be present here will be that imagine if increased pressure is within the right ventricle to pulmonary artery, here is a valve which is called, I'll make it with pink. Here is just a rough diagram. So imagine that right ventricle opening in the pulmonary artery. Here is a valve which is called the, of course, pulmonary valve. And between this right atrium and right ventricle is a valve which we call the tricuspid valve. Fine. So imagine this is a cavity which is present between these two valves. Imagine now when there is increased pressure in the cavities, what it will do is, look at my hand. If there is increased pressure in my hand, these are the two cavities which two valves present here. When increased pressure here, I'll try to open these two valves. You open these two valves. Fine. So a sign that will be seen will be premature opening of the pulmonary valve. I'll write it with red and I'm writing it here. Due to pulmonary valve, there is premature opening of the pulmonary valve that is seen. Second, this tricuspid valve, there will be tricuspid regurgitation. That what is regurgitation? Valve is unable to close properly and the fluid is moving through it behind to the compartment before it. Tricuspid regurgitation along with its characteristic murmur. Now I have explained the symptoms plus the signs that will be seen by the doctor during examination. So just to make your concept very clear in your mind, you don't have to memorize it, you don't have to cram this whole thing. You can easily start a topic and explain this whole concept to anyone very easily. This was the whole story which I discussed because of this one triggering factor. So basically this is the problematic factor. He is triggering all these stimulations within the whole body, these responses within the whole body, decrease venous return and backflow of the blood. Fine. This is the whole concept which I explained. Second point, I told you that cardiac output that is decreased. Now with this venous return decrease, the symptoms will also be the same, that hepatosplenomegaly, hepatic congestion, ascites, fluid overload, all symptoms. These will be the symptoms plus signs will be the same as I've explained you in this whole story. Moving on to this second triggering factor, cardiac output. Now we'll discuss the whole discussion that how this cardiac output, it causes changes and it causes effects. Fine. Okay. Now starting with the second problematic factor which is causing the whole changes in the body, decreased cardiac output. I've already explained why cardiac output is decreased, because less blood is coming from moving out from right ventricle, less is coming to the left atrium, to the left ventricle, and less is moving out through the aorta. Now when there is less cardiac output in the body, what the body will feel? Just you tell me, you don't need to read any book for it. Whenever cardiac output is less, very basic information, let's just discuss it, that whenever cardiac output is less means less blood is ejected from the ventricle, so less blood is moving to the tissues of our body. Now what will the tissues do? Same thing, if you imagine a small child at home and his mother is not giving him milk, then he'll cry that, come on, I am not getting my food, but the only thing which I eat, which I drink is milk, and you're not giving me that food, you want me to die? Fine. So that is the same condition which our tissues will do. The tissues will say, okay, what the hell, what are you doing? I am not receiving enough oxygen, I am not receiving enough nutrients, how will I perform my functions? Of course. So what will happen to the body? Because of low oxygen, dyspnea will develop on exertion. Second, fatigue. Body will be fatigued, of course. He is not receiving energy. He has no energy, no strength to do the work. Easily get fatigued. Fine. Second, exercise. Of course, he can't do exercise. Exercise requires a lot of energy, and he is already deficient of energy. So exercise intolerance, that will occur. Then, when this condition is untreated and it becomes prolonged, in the chronic conditions, what will happen, that the muscle wasting will start to occur, cachexia, weight loss. So these will be the characteristic features of the patient because of this decreased cardiac output. Even orthop orthopnea. So these were the symptoms of the patient. Now, because of this decreased cardiac output, what signs will be present? Again, we'll make that diagram. So diagrammatically things become clear in your mind. This is the ventricle. Till now you have just learned this diagram. This is right ventricle. As usual, this is left ventricle. Now, this left ventricle has to eject blood into the aorta, which is now receiving less amount of blood. Fine? Less coming, so less moving out. When there is less amount of blood received by the whole body, then what will happen is that these will be the symptoms that will appear in the patient. Fine? And some of the signs will be there that are heard on auscultation. Number one is S3 gallop is heard. Number two is the S2. What is S2? S2 is appeared when mitral and tricuspid valves are closed. I'm not sure about it, but S2 sound, it's split into two parts, the aortic component and the pulmonary component. Please just confirm it up. I'm so sorry for this. S2 sound will be heard, so there will be widening of the S2 sound splitting. Fine. S3 gallop is heard. S2 widening of the S2 splitting, that will be heard. So these are basically the cardiac output effects, or these are basically heard on auscultation, and these are the signs that will appear because of low cardiac output. Fine. This was the whole discussion of the pathophysiology and how it will present with clinical features, the signs and the symptoms, how we will diagnose, how we will basically see the patient. Fine. This was our whole discussion today. Just a brief overview of the whole discussion, a quick summary. What is constrictive pericarditis? Fibrous scarring of the pericardium lead to thickening of the pericardium. Ultimately, the pericardial cavity is obliterated. Which phase of the cardiac cycle will be most commonly affected? These are the questions now, like as MCQs can come like so. Which phase will be most commonly affected? Diastole will be affected. Which part of the diastole? Early will be normal, then after the resistance offered, abruptly cessation of the filling will occur. When abrupt cessation of the filling will occur, it will cause the pericardium, the ventricle wall to clap on the pericardium. So as a result, I missed here a point, pericardial knock. It is an important sign also. So pericardial knock will be heard. It is heard in almost 50% of the patients. Then differentiating from cardiac tamponade, cardiac tamponade ventricular filling is impeded throughout the diastole. In it, only in the part of the diastole is affected. Then septum will move, all the diastolic pressure will increase, pressure will then be equalized in both the chambers, in fact in all chambers of the heart. Then talking about the main problems that will occur here are decrease in the venous return, backflow of blood, and decrease in the cardiac output, attributed to the fact that less blood is received to the left ventricle and less is ejected. Fine. So it will cause some effects. Superior vena cava will be, pressure will be elevated, lead to jugular venous distension, jugular venous pressure is elevated, and yes, when this jugular venous distension is occurred, it is called JVD. So JVD made 2 points will be present, prominent X and Y descent. I'll explain you more detail of this X and Y descent when we are discussing the diagnosis of this disease. So we'll look there. Here just JVD will be present and with prominent X and Y descent. That is seen. Kussmaul sign will be present, JVP elevated during inspiration, more JVP elevated than normal. Systemic secretion because of fluid overload, dependent edema, pleural effusions, ascites, hepatic congestion, hepatosplenomegaly. These all symptoms will occur and signs within the patient. Talking about the effects that occur because of decreased cardiac output, less blood will be ejected. So less blood will reach the tissues, oxygen and nutrients will be less. There will be dyspnea on exertion, fatigue, exercise intolerance, muscle wasting, cachexia, weight loss, orthopnea. These are all the features that will present be attributed to decreased cardiac output, and some of the signs heard on auscultation because of it is S3 gallop and widening of the S2 splitting. So thank you very much. I hope you liked the video. I hope you understood the basic concepts and the whole pathophysiology and clinical features. And now I hope after listening the whole video, you can easily explain each and every clinical feature to any of your colleague, any of the teacher who asks you very clearly that yes, this is the symptom, this occurs, how it occurs, why it occurs, the whole mechanism of its formation, its occurrence, these all will be very easily clear. And now I hope after listening to these videos, you will never say that you have to cram for medicine. Medicine is very interesting. It's just linking the small blocks and making the whole puzzle. This is all about today. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Till then, Allah Hafiz. Take care. Stay safe.